I can even close all with a touch of one button. Oh man, that's great. Hey, welcome to our Tesla Adventure X series. Behind me is our 2019 Model X, and it's kind of funny, within the last year or so, the Model X has kind of been viewed as the black sheep of the Tesla world. People think of it as kind of a really expensive, overpriced minivan. When the Tesla Model X was released for the 2016 model year, pricing started at roughly $130 and went all the way up to about $145,000. But for this new 2019 model, pricing starts at $84,000, and the one you see behind me is $86 grand, which means, at least in terms of price, it competes with vehicles such as the BMW X7, the Mercedes GLS, heck, maybe even something like a Range Rover. And in this video, we're not going to look at this vehicle as a pure electric car that is exclusively targeted at an electric fanatic. We're going to look at this as just any other luxury SUV and go over some of the really incredible features that make the Model X better than perhaps its reputation says it is. Try it again. You're good. I think it's stuck.
I'll try one more.
The craziness with the Tesla Model X starts right here with the automatic doors. Even a base model like this car has these crazy electric doors. So to get into a Model X, you actually push in on this chrome strip on the door and it swings open to greet you. How incredible is that? And you can actually close it automatically too. Just reach for the interior door handle, grab it, and there it closes. But it gets more advanced if we step over to even the driver's side, because I can get it to unlock and open by simply just walking up to it. I don't have to touch anything whatsoever. Now the coolest part about the door is you don't have to manually grab the release to have it glide close. You can simply just close it like a normal door and then it's soft close. But there's some even crazier things you can do using the remote control. Of course, the opening and the closing of the doors is totally configurable within the center console. So if you don't want it to automatically open when you walk up to it, you don't have to. And the same thing with this feature right here on the key. By double tapping the lock icon, check this out, I can open the driver's door, and by double tapping it again, I can open the passenger door. And then if I triple tap it, check that out, I can have both doors close simultaneously. And if you think the front doors are incredible in their tech, wait till you see the rear doors. Probably the most iconic feature on the Tesla Model X are the rear doors, which are called the Falcon Wing doors, and they work very similarly to the front doors. I can either push a button on the door and they come gliding up, or I can activate them using the key fob as well. We should dive into their operation really quick though, because they do provide some unique benefits as well as some kind of unique drawbacks. The Falcon doors were one of the biggest and most technically difficult challenges for Tesla when they produced this Model X, because the operation of them is truly bizarre. They don't just open up like a gullwing, they kind of bend and flex, and the idea is to have the most possible space when getting kids and people and things into the rear seat in the smallest opening. And there are a few benefits to this. When the Falcon doors open, if you're, for example, loading a car seat, you have the total doorway to get the seat and the kid into the car, plus you're kind of shielded over here by any kind of rain. It really seems to be a great solution. The downsides are, well, engineering difficulties. I mean, there's a lot of sensors and there's a lot of technology and servos and motors that go into these doors to make them operate. And the sensors, they work pretty well. They won't allow the door to open into another car or into a garage, but what it means is they're pretty cautious. So if you're in a pretty tight space, getting the Falcon door all the way open is pretty much impossible because it might open halfway, it might open a quarter way. It'll stop before it runs into anything that will break itself. Now to close the Falcon door, there's one of really 3 or 4 ways. You can push a little button over here on the door, which will allow it to close. You can push a button here on the interior, which will allow it to close. You can use the key fob, and you can also use the central screen. One of my favorite parts of the Model X compared to many of its competition is the front trunk. Now the front trunk is actually pretty sizable. You can put a decent amount of cargo capacity into this frontal area. But the best part about it is most SUVs you have to have some kind of cargo shelf to secure items away from the prying eyes of burglars and the like. But having a front trunk like this is a great secure way to lock up valuables. And to close it, it isn't automatic. It's kind of the only manual moving part on the car that you have to close. And same thing with opening. It's a double click and then a lift. All right, probably the next most interesting part about the Model X that separates it from just about any other car in the world is this windshield, which is absolutely massive. Most windshields stop right about here or so. This one actually continues all the way above the driver's head. But the cool part is you'll notice that the top part of it is tinted, which means it gives you a little bit of shade away from the sun. But this unique windshield also, how do I put this? It creates a lot of other issues, and Tesla had to get really creative on how they solve them. Even though the top part of the glass is very tinted, it still lets some light in, and you still have this strip of untinted glass here where the sun can shine in, which is where your sun blocker would typically go. But how do you have a sun blocker if there's no roof to start the transition between roof and blocker? Well, Tesla had to get super creative. They've got this massive blocker that extends from the A-pillar and is actually magnetized. So there's a magnetic coupling right here with the rearview mirror. And there's a little flap that folds down and extends it. So now you have pretty much the standard width sun visor here. But it goes even a step further because if you flip down another little flap, there's a mirror with a set of vanity lights as well. And the whole thing just kind of flips out of the way. And then once again, there's another magnet back here that sticks it in place. But if you're still not satisfied with the amount of light that this blocks, there's even one more step further you can go. With your purchase of the Model X, Tesla includes this sunshade. And it's not your typical sunshade you'd expect that would extend over the entire length of the windshield when you're parked. It actually just extends over the top part of the windshield, the part that is tinted. So you can see it's a pretty large piece of mesh fiber here. So here's how it works. Try to do this. It's a little bit tricky, and I would not recommend trying this while you're driving, but let me orient it correctly. This pops in over here. You can see the little cutout for the rearview mirror, just like that. And then it actually, if I can figure this out, will secure itself above the windshield and into place like that, and then it's all kind of magnetized into position. But what's nice about this now is you have a standard size windshield, you have the tinted glass above your head, and you also have this mesh shade that protects yourself from the sun. You can still see it. I mean, it's not completely gone, but it really does cool down the interior of the cabin quite a bit. This whole shtick of the Model X being kind of the ultimate electric minivan comes from the fact that you can get the Model X as a 7-seater, but it all depends on your budget because this is the most affordable one, and this one is only a 5-seater. You have 2 individual seats up front, and then this rear bench which sits 3 abreast. You can actually fold it even by just tugging on this little lever, and it folds flat completely, which is great for longer items. Even a little bit of recline if you so desire. But if your budget extends a little bit further, you can get the 7-seater, and then the most expensive configuration is actually the 6-seater, so 2, 2, and then 2 in the third row as well. Of course, the front seats are not your typical front seats either. First of all, they've got this pretty unique, almost space-age design. This interior is the cream interior, which is an upgrade over the standard black. But what I love about the seats is that they do a little bit more than your standard Model 3 seat, which is the car we had before this, because one of my issues with the Model 3 is you couldn't move the headrest, but in the Model X you can. I can actually use this little multi-function switch down here to raise the headrest up and down electrically, which is a super premium feature. Once you get past the really cool seats, you start noticing some of the really unique interior touches, such as this door design. I love the way they've incorporated this handle right throughout this wood trim. It's super elegant. Looks like it just flows down the side of the door. And then look at this elegant door handle that just gently exudes its way out of the door panel. But there are some less than premium features as well. For example, this switchgear down here, the window switches, the mirror controls, even the transmission selector. Well, they're Mercedes parts bin, but Mercedes parts bin from, you know, 5 to 10 years ago. It's previous gen Mercedes switchgear. For most people, you would have no idea that's where it came from. But if you're really a car fanatic, it might bug you knowing that some of your brand new Model X parts come out of a 7-year-old Mercedes. The Model X is one of the most pronounced rear wings of any SUV I've ever seen, and it's actually a little bit of an interesting story because depending on what year Model X you have and what trim, your wing actually might retract down into the trunk lid, nice and elegant, but on this new one, it's actually fixed in place. So this is how it sits all of the time. It looks like it should retract. It looks like it should be able to kind of gently float down into the rear trunk, and some of the older ones, some of the more expensive ones could have, but not this one. But let's talk about trunk room. Model X has one of the most useful trunks I have seen maybe ever, and that's partly due to the fact that on an electric vehicle like this, all the components are down low and pretty flat. So yes, the trunk is quite cavernous. You can realistically fit a tremendous amount of stuff back here, but what's cool is that this floor is actually kind of a false sense of space, because check this out. I can actually pull out this rear panel, I can stand it up as a little divider, and I've got a huge amount of depth in the rear, but actually this forward panel also lifts up, and I have even more space toward the front of the trunk, and I believe you can actually take out these panels all together, and now you have an even larger space if you're not looking to store more flat items. It's just a great, awesome piece of packaging back here. You've got a couple little tie downs here, a 12-volt outlet, and also these funny little windows that are covered in suede and act as little shelves. So what does the Model X drive like? Well, it drives like a large, heavy SUV. We weighed this vehicle in at 5,400 pounds. Now, one of the coolest things is that Tesla does over-the-air updates to improve the experience of the vehicle, and one of the recent ones was an update that made the suspension just a little bit more compliant. So it kind of floats along, but you can also change that throughout the setting. Of course, being a Tesla, you'd expect it to do that, throw you back in your seats, and even the base Model X does that. Tesla says 0 to 60 in 4.4. If you get the performance though, 0 to 60 in 2.7. But the rest of the driving experience is, well, pretty normal. It steers, it stops just like any other SUV might. The only difference being the regenerative braking. So when I take my foot off the gas, it slows down quickly. You can see it engages the brake lights here, and we come to a complete stop. And then, if you need to move, you just give it the beans, and off you go. It's not quite as punchy as our old Model 3, but it certainly isn't no slowpoke either. There are a few complaints I have with the Tesla Model X, and some stuff that just baffles me. For example, this vehicle has cameras absolutely everywhere around the outside of the vehicle for the autopilot and self-driving system, but there's no 360-degree camera when you go to reverse. There's also no wireless charging, which is kind of ironic for a vehicle that's all about charging and being charged. Then there's the fact that you actually still have to use the good old-fashioned key, and that seems like a weird complaint, but on our Tesla Model 3, you used your phone as the key. And in the Model X, you still have to use the good old-fashioned key. This one's seen in a red key condom, but the reason it's weird is because on the Model 3, the key would use your phone's Bluetooth to access the vehicle. You can still remotely start and unlock and lock the Model X with the app, but you have to have access to cellular data, which in a lot of times in Colorado, we just don't have. Let's start the interior look with something, well, pretty obvious. There's no on or off button anywhere. Instead, you just put your foot on the brake, the door automatically closes, and then the car is ready to go. So foot on the brake, door closes, into drive, and we are completely ready to go. I actually much prefer the Model X interior to the Model 3, and even though it may look a little bit older, it does one thing far better, and that's the fact there are two screens. You have the central IP here for everything vehicle related, and then you have a screen right here that displays your speed right below where you look when you drive. And these actually little screens in here are completely configurable as well, so I can decide between car status and phone status and trips, and I can click them and do all sorts of fun and new and different things. It also shows my autopilot and everything in there. So it's nice having one screen that's kind of dedicated toward driving, and then another screen that's dedicated for everything else. This screen right here controls, well, all the opening panels on the vehicle. So look, I can open the passenger side door, I can open the driver's side door, I can open both rear doors, and what's cool is you can actually see the rear doors open in real time on the screen. Even, check this out, the trunk. So it's nice to know what's open when it's open, and then I can even close all with a touch of one button. Oh man, that's great, and everything closes at once. And it's also pretty cool because the vehicle in the display matches the vehicle that you have, so it's a white Tesla Model X. Tesla, of course, is the king of kind of fun Easter eggs, and the Model X here is no exception. I, of course, have my whoopee cushion mode, which a lot of you have seen. I can turn my navigation into the face of Mars right there. Wow, look at that! I mean, all sorts of goofy stuff. If I want, I can even select the fireplace. And it's all done right here through the 17-inch display. Wow, that is not what I want. But one of the coolest things that's in this display is the arcade mode. And usually I don't like these games because I'm not a huge fan of these, like, how do I call them, 1980s kind of dinky games. No offense if you're into asteroids. But they do have a new game called Beach Buggy Racing 2. And it actually is super, super fun. Here's how it works. You actually use the primary vehicle controls to play the game. So I can race my buggy using the real steering wheel in the car, which turns the little buggy, and the real brake in the car, which stops the buggy. It's basically like Mario Kart, just in real life. The climate control in the Model X is pretty neat as well. So pull up the climate menu. You have, of course, your automatic climate system. But the other thing you have is these heated seats, and you have 5 heated seats for each of the front seats as well as each of the rear seats. For the rear seat passengers, you have to turn them on and off from the front seat here, but you also have, check this out, a heated steering wheel. The Tesla Model X comes standard with this streaming service called Slacker. You've got all sorts of favorites you can program in here. Classic rock, for example, is one that we listen to non-stop. But the cool thing is you also have a traditional FM radio. And in the Model X, unlike the Model 3, you also have Sirius XM, so you can buy a Sirius XM subscription if you so desire. But the screen in general is just massive. I mean, take a look at how big the GPS map is. And of course, all these little red dots are your superchargers for charging throughout the country and even throughout the world. So we can even go down into Mexico and see the superchargers, and to select one, you just click it, navigate, it'll tell you how long it'll get there, and it always estimates the amount of charge you'll have when you get there. Compared to our Model 3, there are some nice manual buttons. For example, that button right there always opens the glove box. You don't have to go into a menu on a screen. Same thing up here, you've got pretty traditional vents that you can open and close and move about with your hand. I know the Model 3 has that cool single vent across the entire dash, but it's nice just being able to pick and choose where it goes manually. Being a pretty minimalist interior, everything moves out of the way to get to other things. So this armrest here, you have 2 cup holders, but no center armrest storage. That comes in over here. So you've got this little cubby that pops up. This is great for holding your phone. You've got a couple of USBs, a 12 volt for charging, and then you've got this huge cubby right here that extends way far into the dashboard, which means you can store stuff like these gloves. But right here we have 2 additional cup holders, and what's cool about them, or perhaps a little weird, is they're removable. The halves are, and you can extend them for larger bottles, or even bigger bottles, or huge bottles if you so desire. And then of course, if you just have standard beverages, you can use these little semicircles and place them in the slots for stuff like that. Another storage bin down in the front here, but no wireless charging pad. What the heck, Tesla? This Tesla, of course, has many more options than I'm even going into in this video, but stuff that you may have heard of already, such as Sentry Mode, which is an advanced security system that allows the vehicle to monitor its surroundings when in park, and if someone comes near it, it'll say you're being recorded, and it'll play loud music and all that kind of stuff. Uses a significant amount of power, though. Just a tremendous amount of tech in here. You've got pin to drive, cabin overheat protection. You can set it up where when you get home, it'll automatically open your garage because it knows you're home. You can connect it to your Wi-Fi for software updates. I mean, the stuff just goes on and on about what Tesla offers. Of course, you can see what's new in updates by just checking on things. So it really is a advanced piece of tech here. One thing I do miss, though, is the good old-fashioned volume knob. You have to use this little slider here or the knob on the steering wheel, which is the way we do it almost all the time. Your standard long-range Model X, like this one, has a range of 325 miles according to the EPA. To unlock the charge port, I just push this little button on the Tesla connector, and then you can plug it in like that. And off we go. Now to stop charging, I do the same thing. I just push the little button, it unlocks the connector, and come on. This little guy will close automatically. I know it's August, but I gotta show you the Tesla Model X Christmas mode or Xmas mode. So if I lock this car in this funny Easter egg, it should start doing some funky stuff. Well, there you have it. At $130,000, $140,000, which is what the Model X cost when it came out in 2016, it was a big ask for what you were getting, but now that the Model X is in its third year of production with a base price of about $84,000 and $86,000, as you see configured behind me, it's competing with vehicles like Range Rover Sports, full-size Range Rovers, even something like a Lincoln Aviator, maybe on the performance side, the Jeep Grand Cherokee Trackhawk. So it's competing with vehicles that aren't out of this world in terms of price, that are considered, yes, expensive, but still luxury premium SUVs. And at 86 grand, you get a tremendous amount of technology and performance in a vehicle that also is very cheap to own and run, because you have no oil changes, you have no regular maintenance per se, rather than tire and maybe brakes. So I think it really does start to make a lot of sense. And yes, it's a few years old, but it still holds up quite well to today's modern and brand new SUVs. As always, this is Tommy with the Fastlane Car. Go back to tflcar.com for more news, views, and real world reviews.